vertidos en este espacio son de exclusiva responsabilidad de la persona o institución que los emite.
It almost seems a little like we always say, good night, good day, good morning, good everything. But it's really not a good night, and it's really not a good day. It's a horrible night for so many. It's a horrible day, and we just have these routine messaging that we use, and I just wanted to acknowledge to all the viewers, the gravity of what's going on, which is what prompted me to do this show. And I invited two wonderful guests, Dr. Peter Canaris, who's a very close friend, and he is the consultant. He's been my consultant for years, and he is also a guest today. And Dr. Ani, I'm going to use her first name as a mantra when I do meditation exercises. Kalajan, who has also been a guest on this show before. But she's traveled worldwide and has dealt with disasters, mass disasters and genocides. And I couldn't think of anyone more suited than Ani to be on the show. So without further ado, I did want to indicate that the show is being recorded on YouTube. Estamos grabándolo on YouTube. By tomorrow, the show will be accessible, of course, not only on YouTube, but on Tribuna TV's website, on FaceTime, and on other electronic platforms. So I will certainly post links to these as soon as I'm able to do that. And I encourage people who are not able to attend today, to do so at their leisure. I think, frankly, that this is, if not the most important show that I've done in all my years, and I think by August it's going to be. I'll be at my 4th anniversary. Certainly one of the top 3, 4, or 5 shows. It's something that is inescapably one of the most significant, and I would dare say probably the most significant problem that we are facing right now in the United States and globally. I mean, there's violence is surging all over globally. I encourage the viewers, les pido a los televidentes, si quieren, to take, we have several slides as usual. I try to cover as much as is possible in a show that lasts about an hour and 20 minutes, just to at least give you good solid basics that you can have some sense not only of what's going on and why, what the issues are, but more significantly, what you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones. Things that are within your reach to do. Cosas para manejar los riesgos que todos estamos sufriendo actualmente. The show's really going to cover a lot of risk management, not only in terms of violence and hate crimes, but also we have effective tomorrow. I mean, today is August. Here we go. I get confused with my anniversary. Today is May 26th, and tomorrow, May 27, mañana, el 27 de mayo, is already the beginning of the extended Memorial Day holiday weekend that will end on Monday, which is May 30. And in several schools, several districts, for instance, Nassau County, which is in Long Island, the kids already are off as of today. So for some people, the holiday is already beginning today, Thursday, May 26th. So feel free to take photos of the slides. You can certainly take screenshots by tomorrow when you have the recording. And I encourage you to do that because, frankly, we, the three of us, Dr. Peter and Ani and myself, we put together quite a number of, relevant information about what violent types of crimes exist, reactions to these incidents, phases of a disaster, starting with the actual disaster until, years later when there's going to be healing. This healing is going to go on and on and on and on. We're close to 10 years of what happened in Sandy Hook. And believe me, the people in Sandy Hook, they're coming out in droves right now supporting what happened in Robb Elementary School in Texas. So don't tell me that 10 years, is sufficient. It's not. It's something that stays with you forever. So without further ado, and I did want to recognize and acknowledge my producer, Oscar Luna. Oscar, si quieres saludar a los televidentes.
Gracias, Oscar.
Oscar, recognizes how hard and difficult our times are today. He's the magician behind putting together the program and putting us on the air and making the show successful. So I did want to acknowledge Oscar. There are other people I will acknowledge later on when we get to resources. So Don Oscar, ¿me puede poner el primer slide? First slide, please. ¿Ya está? Okay. So this show is called Will the Hate Violence Ever End? And you can see that, my consultant and guest, Dr. Peter Canaris, my guest, Dr. Ani Kalajian. And I decided as a subtitle to put how many more casualties must we suffer? So the evolution of this TV show spans about 10 days, approximately. It started when I was aware of the mass shooting that took place at the Tops Friendly Market in Buffalo, New York. This was May 14, and here we are on the 26th, about 12 days ago. 13 people, 11 of them black, 2 white, were shot 10 fatally. And because of the trail of devastation and impact in my own home state, I'm from New York, and requests for assistance in crisis management, I am the co-chair of the Disasters Resource Network of New York State Psychological Association. So I wanted to certainly mention that DRN has been actively involved in this. And I did want also to acknowledge the psychologist of FUNny. This is the Psychological Association of Western New York, who these psychologists are fielding and trying to help the communities there in Buffalo cope with this. And I wanted to, acknowledge them and how hard it is for them and for the people of Buffalo. And my heart goes out to them, and whatever we can do to assist, even if it's, from some of the messaging that we give in this particular show, then I hope that it will be of help and assistance to them. So I know I had my work cut out, and I wanted to reach out to my viewers at a time when wounds are very raw, and of course they're still very raw. And what I wanted to do was basically focus on safety concerns and the prevalent fear and apprehensions about risk factors for the extended Memorial Day holiday from May 27th, as I mentioned, beginning tomorrow through May 30th, and to do a TV show to focus on these issues and interventions. And I was preparing to do the show based on that horrific mass shooting event at the supermarket at Tops, when all of a sudden, I saw breaking news on May 24, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I mean, it's almost, Peter and Ani, it was almost like when I was being interviewed following the planes that crashed in the North and South Tower, and I saw the South Tower collapse, because the North Tower was hit first, but it was the South Tower that collapsed first. And I'm watching on TV as I'm being interviewed. I saw the tower collapse, and it was like a numbing. I knew what I was seeing, and it was like a part of me. I couldn't comprehend it. And when I saw breaking news about what was happening at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, and I just couldn't believe it. And sure enough, I started looking, watching and closely following the news. And at least the latest count is 19, precious children, about 8, 9, and 10 years old, 2 teachers, 11 a.m. Central Time, May 24, were gunned down. So more than ever, even now, with my guests, Drs. Peter and Ani, I thought that it was more incumbent to do a show lasting, like I said, about an hour, 20 minutes, to put together resources to respond, reach out, assist an injured country to squarely seek and respond to what is at the top of the list, I believe, of problems we face. Shortly after, I think the following day, I heard a major news network host say, after the Robb Elementary School mass shooting, so many of us are becoming desensitized, and it's true. We see these things over and over and over again. There's also some rhetoric that takes place that we hear among elected politicians and in the news, and well, if not for this, maybe this is the problem, or what about this? What about that? It's almost like you're seeing breaking news flashes all the time, Chirons on TV, and you're also trying to assimilate other things that are going on at the same time. Ukraine, that continues to be a major disaster. It becomes overwhelming, and I would say, and Peter, and Ani, you can certainly chime in, that there is a desensitizing effect to this, and I think we really need to be careful not to allow ourselves to get into it, to become victims of this. Okay, so let's move on. I know that I still feel and react as a result of what happened at 9/11, and you all will know that I did a 20th year anniversary special program. I think it was on September 10th, just right before. I certainly am not desensitized to Columbine, Sandy Hook, Pulse nightclub, Virginia Tech, Las Vegas shooting, Parkland. There's an intolerable trail of senseless, horrific tragedies. And I know, Ani, you sent an email. I think there were like 300. I'm not even sure how many school shootings you put down.
Yes, it was about 276.
It was just in.
Yes.
So, don Oscar, por favor, el slide número 2. This is an extended. So, there's no vaccine for hatred and hate violence. Can it be that there simply is no cure for the hate and the evil in the hearts of people? It's a complex topic. With my guests, again, Drs. Peter and Dr. Ani, what we're going to do is take a closer look at mass acts of violence, causes, impact to survivors, loved ones, their communities, and all society, coping more effectively when victimized by hate, bias, violent acts, and the long road to recovery. Again, it's you have short-term, long-term, and long-term can be years. Significantly, and this is really what I want to hammer in today, prevention, safety, risk management precautions drawn from decades of experience. We're going to take a look at types of mass violent acts, causation, triggering beliefs of hate crimes, impact to society, society's reactions, the response phases, cultural and ethnic groups dealing with different cultures and ethnic groups, socio-political climate of the time, the role of the news media and social media. We're swamped by this. You turn the TV on any moment, and this is what you can get. Same thing with news media right now. Victims' reactions, physical, emotional, behavioral, cognitive, reactions of children, very young children under the age of 6 to 11, adolescents, adults as well. I left them out. We're going to look at adults too. The specter and concerns and fear and cautions around suicide risk, and also potential risk of danger to others. Intervention steps starting with the very beginning, crisis, emotional first aid, longer term needs, and then ultimately what Peter and I have talked about before, developing resilience and post-traumatic growth. And we'll give you resources. As always, I've dedicated the show, and this show is dedicated to all affected by these senseless tragedies. Generically, I'm lumping a lot of the tragedies together, but I really wanted to dedicate this show mostly, in particular, my heart goes out so much to both Buffalo and Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. So it's in particular to these two horrific situations that the country's facing with and dealing with right now. Puedes sacar a slide, por favor, Oscar. Anything wanted to add, Peter? I know that the viewers know you well. Did you just want to give a, like a very brief statement of who you are, what you do, just so, because we have under resources your name towards the end, and I know that the public has come to know your face.
Yes.
You're almost as familiar as I am on my own show.
Yeah. Well, Roy, once again, while I'm so glad to be with you on the show, it's so unfortunate, it's sad, the topic that we're once again faced with. And this is, for me, over the course of my career, I've done so much work in public education. Years back with the American Psychological Association and New York State Psychological Association in public education. And every initiative that we've had, and the very first one that got things going was the tragedy at Columbine. And that was then followed by the next initiative, which was driven by 9/11. And on we went, and we continue to see all these years later these same kinds of hate-filled, violent events, and it just you get worn down from it, and then you get revitalized to determine that you've got to keep trying. You've got to keep trying to get the word out and to find a way for us to come together. Really, as a society, as a country, as a world, and to really defeat hate, to defeat hate and not to give into it, not to just become so, as you were suggesting before, kind of so habituated to the violence and the hatred that we throw our hands up, with the political stalemates and the lack of action that takes place, where we wind up feeling discouraged. We've got to continue to go back to that education and help people heal and really find a way to hope. And I think that's an effort tonight, in part, what we're doing.
Well said. Basically, what you're referring to, and I guess a good word is complacency. Complacency comes in. For many people, they bury their heads in the sand and let's ignore it and just move on. Ani, do you want to any comments about a little bit of background, who you are, and just chime in a little bit before we go on to the next slide?
Thank you so much, Roy, and hello, Peter, and thank you, Oscar. Thank you, all the viewers. This is a very timely and shocking matter, and what you said, Roy, was very appropriate, is that we're still in that shock and disbelief, which is kind of a universal reaction to mass trauma. We're all experiencing mass and collective uncontrollable trauma, and we feel on many levels helpless. And this program, thanks to this program and you, we can really transform the helplessness into positive and sustainable actions, and really understand that we, just like cars and vehicles, could be dangerous and lethal to ourselves and to others. You know that not just homicide, since 2016, we've had also 22,000 gun-related suicides. Actually, homicides were less, 11,760. So if we don't manage our emotions, we could be lethal to ourselves and to others. I think the first thing for me is emotional management, learning, nurturing, nutriendo la inteligencia emocional, intelligence of emotions, learning how to drive our own mind and not to the gutter, not to kill others and not to kill ourselves, but reach out and find the necessary needs and resources like we're going to provide today.
Okay, thank you, Ani. Just for the benefit of the viewers, there are a lot of slides I'm going to be asking Oscar, as usual, to put each slide up when we get there, but I'll only have the slide up momentarily unless it's a slide that warrants a fair amount of discussion, in which case I'll have Oscar keep it up. Some of the things, we've gone over on many occasions, symptoms that children face when they're traumatized in adults. And I want to review it because it's important, but I don't want to take too much time away from the discussion that I think is more important. I did want to share with the viewers as well that I'm wearing a black top. The black is basically, to me, symbolizes mourning. And this is probably closer to the type of outfit that I would be wearing if I were actually out in the community, out in the field, getting my hands busy out in the field, helping with recovery and first aid efforts. I would not be going in a tie and suit. This is probably how I would be dressed. So that's the rationale and the reasoning for down dressing a little bit today. Don Oscar, por favor, slide, el próximo slide, slide 3. So I have a couple of photos here, and what I had wanted to do is pretty much to share non-gory photos. I mean, the viewers are seeing and watching horrific, highly visual and emotionally charged photos that want to make you start crying, from how horrible it is. I didn't want to do that. You already have that. Basically, this is what Tops, the supermarket, pretty much looks like. Beneath that, you have the Robb Elementary School. And beneath that, we have the 21 crosses that were put out in front of the school. I think just as of yesterday, when through DNA tests, all of the victims were identified. And I too have a cross, and my cross symbolically, if I could lay out my cross over there, I would. So symbolically, this is for you, Robb Elementary School. So, por favor, Oscar, puedes sacarlo y pon el cuadro. I wanted to quickly to look at the types of violent acts. This brief, mass riots, terrorist bombings, bioterrorism. This is, with chemicals and with infectious kinds of pathogens. Hostage taking. I mean, hostage taking, can be, individual, but there are situations where you have, many individuals involved. Arson, mass shootings, which is what we are dealing with mostly now. Aircraft hijacking. There are other kinds of events that take place. For instance, vehicular, mass vehicular homicides, as happened in Kenosha when you had the individual that was gunning down during a Christmas parade, killing several of the revelers who were in the parade, and children as well. So, puedes sacar el slide. Did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect. Yes.
Did I miss anything, Peter, or is that pretty much?
Pretty much
comprehensive.
All right, let's look at the psychological impact. This is in general some of the things that we as a society experience. So, número 5, Oscar. We have significant physical and emotional reactions: terror, fear, horror, helplessness, distrust, fear of people, withdrawal, isolation. For some people, there's a feeling of survivor guilt. Why me? How come like I couldn't do something more? Self-blame that I didn't do enough. Blaming, desire for revenge, demand for justice. This is outside of us. You're blaming who was it that did this? What about the agencies that didn't help? What about people that didn't react quickly enough? What about it's taking so long for things to move? The impact of news and social media, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, which is also probably why I was saying, Peter and Ani, that there is a propensity for many people just to desensitize, because after a while, if you remember with COVID, we were on a daily basis for so long, hearing every single day, the new numbers of people contaminated and the new numbers of deaths. It was a daily thing. And like after a while, you would look at something and you see 10,000 and 10,000. What is 10,000? But the moment that you start talking about, well, this is what Uncle John looked like. And Uncle John used to sit at this chair at our dinner table. And this chair now is empty. There's no Uncle John. All of a sudden, that one person alone now becomes very significant. And I think that we need to really keep sight that numbers have a numbing effect. I think that's pretty good. That's a good coincidence, right? Numbers and
numbing.
Yeah. But
yes. Roy, also it's called a lot of times compassion fatigue. We have so much going on that our emotional energy is not capable to address and feel all that we are facing. It's not possible to feel all that we're facing and continue our full-time work and service, volunteerism, etc. It's been very draining.
There were a couple of other.
Also, Roy, I think the habituation or desensitization, which I think Ani is really referring to, is adaptive, because the alternative is a constant cycle of re-traumatization. The way it is today with media, where the breaking news that you mentioned before, the social media, we're constantly being bathed with information about these respective horrors, whether people are suffering from the pandemic, from a war, or from these mass killings. When these things happened many years ago, you'd hear about it at the 6 o'clock news or 11 o'clock, or there'd be a radio report, and we'd be shocked and have this reaction, but we'd be able to then move away from it for a little while and then revisit it. Here it is this constant blaring attention that is demanded of us, where we're living in one horror to the next. And so there will be, I think, adaptive habituation or desensitization, just to make it from one day to the next.
Right, desensitization in service of the ego.
Yes.
So Oscar had put down the slide. There were just a couple of more things that I had wanted to mention in that previous slide. There's hate crimes are reinforced. When we have these events, we see discrimination and stigma reinforced. So we're certainly witnessing a lot of diversity and a lot of different opinions that are being voiced. And it's unfortunate, but those who already in some way have hatred in their hearts, or are more inclined to to have certain thoughts or beliefs about others, the other, that type of stigma continues to be perpetrated. We have to be very considerate of the cultural, racial, and ethnic groups. This country is a huge melting pot. And I also wanted to bring attention to the viewers that there are greater barriers when we're looking at people who are physically or mentally disabled, elderly, single parent families. It's just more difficult. They don't have the resources, they don't have the financial needs, they may not have access to the electronic or technological tools that they need. They may not have access to insurance. They're just sort of forgotten in many instances. There's by far higher rates of PTSD. PTSD is probably most salient, and I say it's the single most prevalent disorder manifested. And if it's not a full-blown psychological diagnosable disorder, there's certainly going to be a lot of symptoms that are suggestive of PTSD, even if you don't have a formal diagnosis. I'm less worried about the diagnosis than I am about the impact to the person. Depression, of course, different other kinds of anxiety. And Peter, we've done shows where we talked about, the impact of cognitive, like somebody was hit or struck in the head or whatever, they're going to have cognitive issues. Prevalence of increased substance abuse, alcohol abuse, etc. We focused on this before, so I don't want to take too much time. And bereavement. We're going to be seeing bereavement that can last a long time. Let's look at some of the typical symptoms. Por favor, Oscar número 6. So I'm going to keep this up just very briefly because we've gone over this before. But, we're looking at the sense of helplessness and fear, very typical problems with sleep, nightmares, regression, acting like you are younger than your chronological age, a lot of somatic complaints, clinging to a parent figure, some regression that would include perhaps bedwetting in somebody who already was not bedwetting, appetite disturbances, changes in behavior like tantrums. Many of these you're going to see in children 6 to 11 as well. You're going to see perhaps preoccupations with death, preoccupations with crime with that age group, school avoidance. Children may not want to go to school. They may be afraid of leaving mommy or daddy before. They may be afraid that they'll be in some ways potentially victimized, especially now, after what we're seeing in Robb Elementary School. Withdrawal. The withdrawal can be from family, from friends, from activities. And the adolescents will have symptoms that are far more similar to adults, including life-threatening reenactment. They may be risk-taking. You'll see like an adolescent that did not used to this, maybe driving faster or, crossing streets with more traffic, just things that normally you'd say, well, this person wouldn't be doing this. Increased rebelliousness, a desire for revenge, delinquent kinds of behavior, which can be more serious, resistance to authority, and feelings of inadequacy and helplessness. Puedes sacar a slide. Peter, anything to add to the children and adolescents that I didn't cover in that slide?
No, the major calls I'm getting and text messages are about fear of going to school, fear in general, they can't sleep, they're having nightmares. So I think we covered it all.
Okay.
And also, as you've mentioned, with the older kids, more of a propensity for rebellious and acting out behaviors.
Yes.
Increased drug use, alcohol,
Yes.
and misbehavior in general, oppositionalism.
All right. Por favor, Oscar, número 7. We're going to look at the adults. Many of these somewhat similar, why not? Again, it's, we're dealing with trauma after like some sort of a disaster. El número 7, Oscar. Okay, so here again, intrusive thoughts, flashbacks. Thoughts is like, you think about it. Oh my God, it's on my mind. It's on my mind. Like I'm thinking about the shooting. Flashbacks is you sort of have images or you have sounds of the shooting, perhaps in your mind. Smell might be in a flashback. You become easily startled. Any little thing, all of a sudden you jump. Hypervigilance, you're on the lookout. Disturbed sleep, nightmares, intense physical reactions, like you start talking about it, or somebody's reminded of something about the incident, and all of a sudden they're reacting physically. For many, isolation, withdrawal, sort of like shutting down. Loss of interest in activities. Again, we see the self-blame guilt that I talked about earlier when we first talked about the impact. Depression, mood swings. So somebody could be more or less even keel and then see something in the news, all of a sudden starts crying, and then somebody says something, do your homework, starts having a temper tantrum. So you'll see these ups and downs. Prolonged grief. I'm positive that we're going to see a lot of prolonged grief. Increased conflicts. There's going to be just disagreements with others. We're going to see conflicts. A lot of somatic complaints. Again, this should not come as a surprise. Headaches, stomach aches, other kinds of aches and pains, muscle tension. For people who have chronic conditions, these may actually worsen. There's a sense of hopelessness. For many, increased helplessness. I can't do this. Like, I need someone to take me there. I'm afraid to go out. I need you to drive me. If you don't drive me, I'm not going anywhere. Loss of self-esteem. You feel, especially if like there's something you think that you could have done that you didn't do, in connections with that self-blame or guilt, you're going to have loss of self-esteem. Oscar, puedes sacar a slide?
What I like to, Roy, emphasize about these symptoms is that we noticed, as you mentioned, we've gone over 52 countries doing humanitarian missions with Meaningful World. And we noticed when we went back to Mexico after 23 years after their devastating earthquake, and when we went there, they said we have no trauma. Work on try to give us training on leadership and mindfulness, etc. So when we went there, we started talking about their traumatic history, and all of a sudden they started screaming, yelling from the earthquake, how they were reacting 23 years before, because they were children and adolescents, and no one gave them opportunity to work with a psychologist or talk about their feelings. They, as long as they got good grades and they were smiling or seemed like they're playing, they were like, oh, he's okay, she's okay. Don't start talking about the trauma. We don't want them to get upset. So there's this misconception that talking about the trauma is going to make you more upset, while talking about it is part of the step to start healing. So we need to bring this up, that even 23 years later, these kids were never addressed about their experiences of the devastating earthquake that was 8.1 Richter scale. And the same, we've seen that it passes on generationally. So I'd like to bring it to everybody's attention to, as much as possible, to try as soon as possible to engage in a therapeutic modality to heal from this, both individually, those who are in Texas, and collectively, us, which all of us are suffering from collective trauma.
Peter, anything to add?
Yeah, also, what I would mention, Roy, is the functional impact. And what I mean by that is the role within the family, and the role within marriage. Very often, there is shame and guilt that I was not able to save. I was not able to prevent this terrible thing from happening to people that I love. It's interesting. I've often found in these circumstances, some of the strongest, most adaptive people that take the biggest fall in all of this, because again, they suddenly have felt powerless, inadequate. This then can lead to sort of a withdrawal, a self-isolating, anhedonia, what we call anhedonia, which is no longer getting enjoyment from anything in life. It has consequences, as you might imagine, for intimacy. I'm also trained in human sexuality as a sex therapist. People develop sexual dysfunctions as a result of that. And that connection begins to break down. As Ani was referring to, by not talking about it, by not, as difficult as it is, by not making that effort to connect and come out of yourself again, over time, that becomes the path to healing. It's a tough road to get there.
We're going to look at the next slide, which are intervention steps. I'll have Oscar put it up briefly, and then I want to take it down. And I'm not that necessarily tied to the order, but I really want to have a discussion, a good 10-minute robust discussion of what your thoughts are about the intervention steps before we go on to the slide after that. Oscar, por favor, ocho. So this is pretty much sort of in fair chronological order, although not entirely so. But it starts with crisis intervention. You know, you have to start making sure somebody's alive, that they're breathing and that they're not bleeding to death. You know, that they're you know, obviously somebody who's drowning, the first thing you got to do is give them CPR. You know, so there's the crisis intervention. That's not necessarily something that mental health professionals will be doing unless they actually have additional training, you know, in performing these kinds of crisis intervention steps. Psychologists will most likely begin at the level of psychological first aid. This is, you know, what's going on right now, you know, in Texas and still going on in Buffalo. But, you know, people just, they don't know what's going on. I mean, I was looking, and I can't begin to tell you, Ani and Peter, how emotional it was for me to see news with parents when they heard that there was a positive identification through DNA. They needed the parents' DNA to identify DNA of children, and something that I did not know until today. Ani, you may have known this because you've been involved in, you know, incredible acts of genocide. I did not know until I heard news reports about the impact of these AR-15 type assault weapons on the bodies of people. They just shred them. They shred them, and they're unrecognizable. And when I heard mothers, you know, wailing and screaming in the background, I started crying. Even now, I'm on the verge of tears just thinking about that. That's where you need the psychological first aid. You know, can you imagine what it's like? You know, you're a parent. You put your kid on the bus at 7:30 in the morning or whatever, and come 3 o'clock in the afternoon, your kid is never coming home again. I can't put my head around what that must feel, and I'm going to have to stop here because otherwise I will start crying. Informational briefings. These are the kinds of things that we're watching right now. You know, the news briefs, the politicians, the police, law enforcement. They're coming out. They're giving you a heads up on more or less what's the status of what we know so far about the shooting. So those are informational briefings, and they need to be really shared from one agency to another. Communication is so important. You have to have really communication, because otherwise pieces of information become erroneous. They become reinforced. You can have something incorrect. Like I heard, for instance, today that the shooting was not in just one classroom, but apparently 3 or 4. So these kinds of things can become, after a while, you know, you're repeating, you're republishing, you're rebroadcasting erroneous information, and you do it often enough, and that erroneous information becomes the truth. Crime victim assistance, community outreach, that's what's taking place right now and needs to take place and will be taking place for quite some time. Psychological debriefing. This is something that among the psychologists and people that are doing the hands-on work on site need to be getting together, and they need to debrief, you know, to convey to one another what it is that they're doing, wherever it is that they're doing, and share their thoughts. I didn't put here, but it's also important for these people, first responders, rescue workers, to keep an eye on themselves, on how they're doing. They're affected. I mean, I'm not there and I'm affected. So you can imagine what it's like. You know, it's your own self-help, your own mental health has to be monitored. Psychoeducation, you need to do training and teaching and educating, you know, like where do we go from here? What can we do to make things safer? What is realistic and what is not realistic? Consider interventions with cultural and ethnic groups. You know, I've mentioned that before. You know, different religious groups. I didn't throw that in there, but I'm going to add that now. Mental health consultations, various types, children and adults. I won't tie that up, Peter. You and I, we've talked many times about biofeedback, relaxation therapy, you know, different types of, you know, DBT and meditation, and there's the hypnosis. There's many different kinds of things. I think it's very important for families to think about a disaster and safety plan and to try to rehearse it. What will happen in the future if something that's a disaster? You know, it's hard to to develop a family safety plan when you send your child to school, but you can certainly teach your children about strangers and about informing somebody. The schools need to work on these kinds of things and doing rehearsal, and parents can do safety plans and rehearsals for hurricanes or tornadoes or other kinds of disasters. Always important to assess risk of suicide, danger to others. This is similar to what Ani was saying. You don't want to avoid talking about this. Avoiding talking about this doesn't make it better. And over time, Peter, something we've talked a lot about, resilience and post-traumatic growth. Puedes sacar a slide. So let's spend about 10 or so minutes on this, okay? Or if it's less, it's less. But I'm going to give about 10 minutes to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, another aspect that becomes relevant and important to consider for many people is reaching out towards spirituality and finding support from others, finding support from spiritual communities, which can provide a great deal of comfort to people. Obviously, it varies with your belief system, your culture, your background, but very often that can provide a great deal of support and solace. It can be tricky, however, because at the same time, when you go through this kind of unthinkable grief and this unimaginable tragedy, anger comes out. And very often anger at God, anger at that sense of, how could this happen? How could this be? So sometimes, it's complicated reaching out spiritually. You've got to go through some additional complex emotions in that process, but it's still worth that effort because, the alternative becomes, the danger comes in self-isolating and pulling in and cutting yourself off from being able, to communicate, to talk about your experience, what you're feeling, what you're going through, and finding compassion, finding connection to others over time. That tends to be so therapeutic. Whether that's in a spiritual form, whether it's with family, with friends, with a psychologist, wherever it might be, there can be help found in that form.
Yes, social support. Thank you for that. Social support has been in the research highlighted as one of the most important elements to help us through these mass collective traumas. Sometimes spirituality is fine, but religious institutions sometimes they push you through to the forgiveness, which is not yet. It's too premature at this time. A lot of religious institutions do not understand the process that we need to first heal the trauma, and then we find the meaning and discover and find out as our post-traumatic growth, PTG, by reframing, finding meaning, etc. So if the institution or religious centers you belong to, they are mindful and they give ample time for discharge without really instilling the guilt and pushing you through, then it's very healing and supportive and helps the healing process.
Peter, how typical do you think it is for a parent or a surviving victim of something this tragic, and certainly Buffalo and Uvalde, to sort of like become angry if you are spiritual, if you do have a religious belief. How often or how typical is it to say, I don't believe anymore. I'm not talking. Where were you? Why did you do this to me? How often do you think that comes? I know it comes up, and I've witnessed it in my own interactions with people. But I'm bringing it up because I do think that it's probably more common than perhaps we'd like to think, and that it's not necessarily it's hardly abnormal. And it's not necessarily something that you want to intervene by saying you don't believe that, don't think that. So,
Absolutely, Roy. It is very, very common, and I think as Ani is suggesting, you've got to respect the process of that person to be able to move through that range of emotions, which will, I think emerging from shock and numbness. Okay, one of the feelings that will be gone through will be doubt and anger, and also guilt and even shame. And you might say, gee, how would a person be ashamed? But some people will relate to it, as I was saying before, as even though logically and rationally there was no way I could intervene or prevent this. Well, if as a parent, we're supposed to somehow magically at all times be able to protect our children. Of course, we can't. And so this will bring up another range of emotions that must not be avoided or squelched. We've got to move through them. It's almost like I heard it said once that when you're confronted by a field of mud that you have to get to the other side, you just put one foot in front of the other and you keep going until hopefully eventually you emerge onto dry land on the other side. So to your question, it is so common in that regard.
Something similar, parallel, and you probably as well, in working with personal injury, occupational injury,
Yes.
or skill accidents, other kinds of assaults or injuries that leave traumatic events that leave injuries, where there's almost like this instinctive feeling, or there's been a death or a loss, and like somebody feels like they have to say something, and they don't know what to say, and for the person who probably doesn't, that's probably a reason why you see more of an inclination to want to be isolated and withdrawn, because the victim or the hurt person doesn't want somebody saying, well, what happened to you? Or are you going to your treatment? Oh, I feel so bad for you. It's like, I don't want to hear this. I really don't want to hear this. Sometimes the best thing to do is say nothing.
Yes.
And I'm here for you if you need. If you need, I am here for you.
Right. We have seen through our research about 10 to 18% express anger. And usually, as we know in psychology, anger is just what we see as a result of all the other feelings of frustration, sadness, guilt, embarrassment, worry, fear, etc., that is not managed and it's on higher level, uncontrollable. and it just blows up in anger. Either we hurt ourselves or others. So we have seen that consistently in all the research that we have done.
I think what's really important when you see anger to double check the thought process behind it, because you want to correct irrational beliefs. Like you don't want to target a particular group of people erroneously because you're angry. That's a cognitive mistake that you're making, so that the anger itself may not necessarily be a bad thing, and it may make somebody want to act and become more involved, but you want to make sure that you don't have the factual errors and the irrational beliefs associated with it.
Well, that's right. I think that's where over time, what you hope for is what you might find initially as this sort of irrational lashing out type of anger that can be over time harnessed into some kind of constructive action, which can be participating, helping, getting involved with other groups who've experienced tragedy as well, where you begin to get to the meaning. You begin to funnel it and channel it in a constructive way. That rarely happens overnight. That's something, I think that's part, again, hopefully, of that process that a person will go through, and sometimes maybe receive some guidance on from a professional, and additional support.
All right, let's look at slide 9. This is basically risk management outdoors, something that we've covered. I thought it was really important to sort of repeat this. So, por favor, Oscar el 9. And I will offer viewers as well that at the last show, I had also put slides on risk management in schools, which I think at this point is very appropriate, and risk management in places of worship. Oscar, el número 9. So here, simple things. I mean, it almost seems a bit like childish to say somebody, do you know where you're going, and do you know how to get there? So you need to be aware of it. You need to be aware if there's closings, if there's traffic problems, street closings. You have to be aware, alert, observant, not be glued to your iPhone. Oh my God, people are crossing the streets, glued to their iPhone, and then they're surprised that they got hit by a car. Be observant. You have to limit the packages you carry, money, credit cards. Don't be opening your wallet outdoors, in a dark area, not access, your car's far away, and you become a ready victim. Your phone should be charged, locked. Get access to one of those apps that's a panic button. So somebody has to know where you are. Hopefully everybody's connected at least to somebody, that you can do that. And if for some reason, really, I understand that there are people that may be isolated and live completely alone and depend only on themselves. This is where you get your panic button. Know the area routes. Like I said, examine places before you enter. Go in. If you see that there's supposed to be a security guard in place. There isn't anybody there. The place looks deserted. Don't go in. Don't walk in. Walk out. Lighting, time of day. It's going to be a little bit more dangerous if it's like 4 a.m, pitch black in certain areas. So keep that in mind. Location. You're going to public gatherings, peak times, very isolated places, dark, deserted. Have some sort of an intervention plan. Like, what would you do if something were to happen, or you saw it, or you suddenly see people running? That's probably a good sign that it's not, like a movie actor coming your way, because the people would be running towards the movie actor, not away. Little telltale behaviors like that. Be aware of vehicles that seem to be going way too fast under the circumstances, and or other vehicles that shouldn't be there. The presence of law enforcement. It's always good if you see people in uniforms, and it's great when you see mounted cops. That is so great because that certainly does provide an air of protection. And you're not going to see the undercovers. Trust your gut. You have to trust your gut. If something doesn't seem right to you, don't keep looking just to make sure that you're right. Puede sacar a slide. Anything to add to this? And again, I alert my viewers that I did put slides up last show on risk management in schools and in places of worship, and I encourage you to look at them because there's going to be obviously a lot more to be said about school safety, certainly after Rob, but not limited to just that. I mean, a supermarket's a public place. You go shopping in a supermarket and you see people there and somebody's like in the middle of arguing or yelling, carrying on and screaming. Obviously that's not a good sign. So these are some things that you need to really keep in the back of your mind.
Roy, two quick points I would make on this. One, to underline your point about getting lost in the cell phone. We all do that. And that really decreases our awareness of what's going on outside of us and sort of narrows us into this kind of thing. And some research I recently came across, which I found very interesting, was the tendency for people to enter a dissociative type process with social media, where they continue to scroll and continue to look and get lost in that. It's almost akin to a hypnotic type of process.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that, you're lost internally and you're not aware of what's going on around you or what's happening. Forget about the other interpersonal consequences of that. It's something to try to become more aware of. The second point I would make is that even as we're highlighting the importance of vigilance, we are talking about awareness and not obsession. Okay, because that obsessive kind of sense of this sense of constant fear and the boogeyman is going to get me can just lead to increased anxiety and sort of obsessive worry. So we've got to balance that, where what we're going for is increased awareness, but not going too far to become to develop an obsessive worry about these things.
Yeah.
You want to be able to live. You want to be able to live and to live safely and enjoy life. That's what you want to do. You don't want to isolate yourself just to make sure you're safe, but you also don't want to expose yourself in a manner that's a bit reckless. We're going to be looking at some risk management techniques or thoughts that I put together. Based more on my patient population, and then coping over the Memorial Day holiday. And then I know, Peter, you had some resources, and Ani, you too, and that we'll wrap up with those. So, por favor, Oscar, slide ton, el número 10. So this is a risk list that I put together for viewers who have medical conditions, although it's not limited only to have to have a medical condition. I think some of it is pretty good anyway. And I put it together for really May 27 through approximately June 5. And the reason that I selected that, recognizing that Memorial Day is May 30, is that, we're seeing spiking. We're seeing spiking of COVID-19, and it takes, incubation period is an average of about 5.6 days. It can range from 2 to 14 days after there's been exposure to someone who's infected. So average is about 5.6 days. So that's where I came up in my formula to about June 5. We're not going to really know the effects of the travel this Memorial Day until ballpark June 5, June 6 in terms of what the numbers look like of people who are infected. It's a little bit less for Omicron, and again, keep in mind that Memorial Day is May 30. Bad weather, erratic weather, ups and downs, and humidity increases the risk of illness, can cause anxiety-related responses also. There's a wealth of research to support this. People who have illnesses, my own patients, their own physical health and health limitations can become affected. The COVID-19 spiking, flu season continues. We have late season spike
Yes.
flu infections in New York, and I would imagine that elsewhere, outside of New York. Height of pollen season, certainly here in New York, and I'm going to assume elsewhere as well. The monkeypox outbreak that's affecting children, hepatitis. I don't think you're seeing too much of it, but it's still, it's out there. Violence. Oh, this is definitely on the rise. Many reasons, and there are many risk factors. Again, the extended Memorial Day holiday has a multitude of potential risks. In some school districts, I already mentioned that there's no school starting today, let alone tomorrow. So again, we're having a lot of multiple possible risk factors. Okay, so por favor, we can put that down. And anything to add to that, Peter? Because I know you have a similar patient population.
Well, just one point I would add, Roy, and that's with patients dealing with medical conditions or older patients, always focus on secure ambulation. One of the things that we find that people are set back by in life through injury so commonly are falls. And for older adults or adults with medical conditions, the risk is that much greater. So whatever it is, that aid that can support my ambulation, a walker, whatever, a cane, whatever is needed, not to be too prideful and honestly, men, I think, are particularly prone to this, to resist and, to try to manage on their own and understandably want to remain as independent as possible. But independence is actually helped by accepting the aid that you need. And we've got wonderful devices and support mechanisms today that maybe were not really so good so many years ago. So let's use them and avoid falls and stay safe.
Did I mention how helpful pets are emotionally and physically? I know the reason that I'm saying that is that we were just joined by my little baby. And she was supposed to be here on another show, but she was sleeping. So she's here today, and she's also in grief. And I just wanted to offer that. This is my my baby, Ginger, and she's a sweetheart, and she's my source of emotion. So that's very spontaneous. It was completely. Oscar, por favor, el número slide 11, el número 11. We're going to look at basic risk management over the Memorial Day holiday. El 11. Okay, so I'll you at the top when the Memorial Day holiday extends from pretty much 6 p.m. Friday to 11:59 p.m. Monday. And I would guess there's probably people that are going to be calling in on Tuesday also. So there's going to be a much larger number of travelers. The information that I have indicates that estimates are close to 38 million, and it's supposed to be the highest travel holiday so far. Expect a huge increase in travel time, about 50% increase. I heard that peak travel time is 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. tomorrow, Friday, May 27. 82% of weekend travelers will be traveling by car. Alcohol consumption is a major contributing factor to motor vehicle accidents. I didn't really want to give you the statistics and the numbers. I didn't think it was that helpful. Just keep in mind that there are a lot of accidents related to alcohol use. So viewers, keep that in mind. There are other incidents that take place, grilling accidents, people who are doing barbecues, drownings, or going to the beach or to the pool. Oscar, puedes sacar este slide y ponme el número 12. So here we have safety tips Plan your celebrations or, outings. It may be that you go out more than once. Seek alternative ways of traveling that don't involve driving. Use a designated non-drinking driver if you will be driving and you'll be consuming alcohol. Give yourself plenty of extra time to travel, given that there's going to be so many people on the road and expected delays. Be patient, listen to music, talk to passengers. If you have children, play games with them. I made this up. How many red cars do you see over the next, from here to the next exit? I mean, there are things to engage the children and yourself. If you're driving either long distances and or for long periods of time, take rest stops, stop. Be aware of high risk times. Try to avoid the road during these times. Be very alert at red lights. Stop signs too. People in a rush, they're going to make careless mistakes. Here, we talked about the phone. Turn your phone off. Make sure that whatever adjustments you need to have in your vehicle, mirrors, the seat, the gas, that everything's done, that you don't have anything left over. It's not good to be on a major highway and it's a rush. You're stopped in traffic and all of a sudden your fuel light goes on. That shouldn't happen. Slow down, drive, don't feel a need to speed up. It's not worth the risks. I know that there's been research that was done, how long it takes to go from New York to California, observing speed limits and really going, doing whatever you could to get there as fast as possible. And let me tell you, the amount of time that was saved for 3,000 miles was just not worth the risks. Keep plenty of space between you and other vehicles. Be aware that trucks, especially, and your 18-wheelers, they need a lot of turning room, and the driver may not. It's not. Don't take it personally. The driver just may not see you. It's a very huge vehicle. Bring refreshments and handy, and by that I mean that you don't want to be opening up a sandwich that's in a bag, and it's not only in a bag, but it's wrapped inside of cellophane in the bag. And you got to pull it out, and then then it's cut in half, and you want to eat half of it. That's not the time to do it. Whatever you're going to have, it's a snacky food, should be immediately accessible so that it doesn't distract you. Have it available. Be careful. Again, obviously, this is not going to be in a car, but if you're outside, outdoors, pool, beach, whatever, parks, be careful about heat stroke and other kinds of problems. Use sunblock. Stay hydrated. Be mindful of the safety of your pets, whether it's in the cars, pool, beach, or fireworks. Puedes sacar el slide. Peter and Ani, anything to add to these two before we get to your wrap-up slides and the resources?
No, I think very comprehensive, Roy.
Okay, so the next slide, I'm going to put it up, Peter. It's your slide,
Yeah.
So I want you to walk us through it. Por favor, el número 13. This is compliments of Peter. Peter, thank you for making this available. I think I streamed it a little bit.
Yes, yes.
Courtesy of American psychosocial or psychological?
It should be psychological. That's a misprint.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see it myself. Just goes to show for a while.
Yeah. My apologies. That's an error.
Why don't you just share with the slides still up?
Yes. Share with
the viewer whatever you want to about that particular slide, and I encourage the viewers take photos or screenshots tomorrow.
Now, just a few points, Roy. The struggle to understand, how a shooting could occur. This is something that it's such a shock because it's so alien to our lives and to our way of thinking and just a terrible, terrible thing. So there will be that struggle that we may not be able to understand it in a satisfactory way, but it's still there, the effects of it. Okay, and then also, we know that it's typical for people to experience that range of emotions that we were talking about before. Everything from anxiety to anger, fear, disillusionment, inability to sleep, inability to be close to others, withdrawal, self-isolating, concentration difficulty. It could be a whole host of things, and some more salient at different points in time, and sometimes different people will experience that differently. To understand that these abnormal responses are actually understandable responses, and responses to an abnormal situation. Then over time, again, we'll go back to looking for support, whether it's from family, from friends, to try to deal with to lessen the emotional impact, to find some way of connecting and helping with processing those powerful feelings that we were talking about before, and looking for ways to make them manageable and to find our resilience. And then eventually to be able to go on living with daily life, to get back to some sort of normal way of living, and finding the strength of resilience to be able to bounce back. Below that, on the slide, we have a number of resources for managing trauma related to mass shootings. You can read through them on your own. Some in Connecticut, New York City, the American Counseling Association, American Psychological Association, all the way through. I encourage people, they're online, look at these resources. There's a wealth of information and ideas on how to be able to cope, to move forward, and make that difficult journey toward recovery.
Okay, thank you, Peter. One of the things that I did not add or mention, but I'll do it now, is that with many of my patients, I think it's important for people to stay on top of the news. I mean, you need to have some idea. You need to know if COVID is spiking or not. You need to know if there's a shooter in the area where you live. There's some things you need to know. You need to know if like a tornado's heading your way. But that doesn't mean that you have to be glued to the news 24/7. And for many of my patients who have been in some way injured or victims of some traumatic event, including victims of crimes, it's something that just brings back to their brain what happened to them, and it becomes very painful for them. So I also caution viewers, don't necessarily be glued all the time, to news. There's a reasonable amount of exposure, and other than that, take your time to do more. Focus on enjoyable shows, enjoyable programs. Your kids, your family, be more involved and more engaged with people than with watching the news, other than what you really need to know. Okay, so Ani, you're on, por favor, el número 14, slide 14. This is courtesy of Dr. Ani Kalajian. No, el 14. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So Ani, you're on. This is your slide. Thank you.
I think we lost Ani. A technical problem with her connection, Roy.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm not that far off in terms of the adverse effects of connections and things like that. Didn't we do a show called
Yes.
something about the
Yes. Yes.
She got in the web. All right. So in all fairness to Ani, she provided this slide. Is up, Peter?
Yes. Yes.
How to decrease violent crimes, nurture peace. So free and easier access to mental health services, education for emotional management, starting at the kindergarten. I think it probably even earlier than that nowadays. Increase certifications prior to purchasing guns, training classes, licenses, just like driving a car. This is being hotly debated right now.
Yeah.
Public health approach. United States has regressed in education. High school students have reading level of 10 years old. We have health care and it's hard for me to say. Healthcare and happiness increases in gun violence. Okay, we're aware of that. Establish peace and forgiveness gardens for community support and healing. Encourage discovery of deeper meaning and peace, until sense of responsibility. Until sense, develop a sense of responsibility to uplift one another. Recreate acceptance and understanding between political parties and shift the destructive, polarized political climate. Exclamation mark. I would probably add another 2 more exclamation marks to that. That's certainly something that people need to be aware of their actions in terms of who they decide should be their leaders. I really want to keep this as apolitical as possible. I'm mindful and respectful of viewers having their political interests, and I don't want to infringe on that. But you need to be aware of what the people who supposedly are the leaders and who, whatever it is that their actions are, impact on you and the lives of you, your loved ones, and your children. You have to be aware of that and be aware that you have a say in making changes that you think need to be changed. Okay, Oscar, puedes sacar anything to add to that, Peter, for Annie?
No, I think very comprehensive.
Okay, Oscar, puedes sacar ese slide. And ya pusiste 15. ¿Qué pasó con ella? Oh, okay. So this is, ya salió 15. All right, these are psychology resources. You have, I'm on the left, that's my company, Long Island Psychological Consulting. Peter, you see him on the right. And for Dr. Annie Kalajian, I provided an address. She's in New Jersey, phone and internet, some websites for you to look. She's founder and president of Meaningful World. There's a lot of references and resources available. Just take a look. CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. This is an excellent resource for many things: mental health, violence, disastrous crisis work. There's a lot, COVID, a huge range of topics. SAMHSA, this is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Safety. I think that's the agency. The last AA, I believe, is agency or administration. No, administration. That's it. It's wonderful. It's wonderfully educational. Log in, look at it. It's incredible the amount of information that's available there. I certainly put much of my training over years, looking at CDC and SAMHSA and other kinds of professional sources and resources, and of course, a lot of textbooks and workshops and conferences went into this as well. New York State Psychological Association, that's Peter's and my parent of association in New York. This is the regional association under the American Psychological Association. They have a tremendous number of resources and access to educational materials and psychologists. And again, the Disaster Resource Network, I'm giving them a shout out. And also they have regions, including Westchester. I had a guest before in Westchester Psychological Association. I had two members that were actually attended our TV show. And a shout out also to the Psychological Association of Western New York. My heart goes out to Buffalo and to the psychologists who are hard at work. You have your work cut out. So you have my admiration and appreciation for what you're doing. APA, Peter made reference to it, the American Psychological Association. There's a phone number and a website. It's incredible the amount of information that's available there. Suffolk County Psychological Association. This is um, the regional association of New York State Psychological Association that covers the geographic area that Peter and I live in. We're both in Suffolk, and they are absolutely wonderful given their size. So, puedes sacar el slide. Anything to add to this list or to my commentary about the resources, Peter?
No, I think it's a great and very comprehensive list, Roy. And I really encourage anyone in need to use that list actively because there is help available.
All right, so we're at a wrap. Oscar, vamos a cerrar unos minutos. ¿Tienes alguna despedida, final words, Oscar, for our viewers? Be very careful. Peter, any 2 or 3 bullets for our viewers?
Well, my hope is that we won't need these shows very much longer. But if we do, I think we'll be there, Roy, and others like us to continue to try to provide useful information, public education, and some support.
Thank you. Well, thank you for being a guest. I mean, you've been a loyal friend for so long. and a consultant and involved on the show. I don't even know how many times, but it's been a while. I look forward to doing my 4th anniversary. I believe it's coming up in August. I keep confusing this with May.
Yes.
So we'll do something around then. To my viewers, I know that we covered what really is a very grim and horrible topic area, but it has to be talked about. It has to be covered. But what I'm really hoping that mostly that you got out of this was a little bit of education up front in terms of what kinds of things, what kinds of acts are violent acts, and different kinds of violent acts that exist, what the psychological reactions are in general, what children might experience, what adults might experience, types of emotions and the phases following some sort of a crisis. But most significant for me is that you walk away with a healthy attitude or outlook, not necessarily attitude, but a healthy outlook that you can enjoy being out, but you have to be careful. There's no reason that you can't mix risk management and prevention with enjoying life and being careful. So I'm hoping that the kinds of tools and strategies that we talked about on this show are something that you really can put to use, because this could make the difference between you being a casualty and not. And I'm really so hopeful that all of my viewers, that you will have a safe Memorial Day extended weekend, and that you won't have any of these issues. And please nurture your kids, love them, nurture your family, protect them, nurture your community and your neighbors, be aware of what's out there, see something, say something. And if you need help, don't hesitate. Call me, call Peter, call a pastor or a rabbi, or a good friend. Don't be guided by social media. Don't be guided too much by what's out there in the news. Don't expose yourself too much to toxic kinds of things. Be very, very safe. That said, muchas gracias, Oscar. Peter, again, thank you. Ani, I don't know what happened, but thank you. You were wonderful, and you will have the recording available, and I do plan to use you in the future as a guest. So to all my viewers, really be safe. Peter, be safe. Enjoy the holiday, and Oscar, and all of the people, all of the team of La Tribuna Hispana, Emilio and Ezequiel Penado and Emilio Ruiz. Gracias. Un fuerte abrazo virtual, a virtual embrace. And my heart goes out to Buffalo and to Texas. So that said, good night, everybody, and let's try to make it a good night.
Good night.